Supervisor of Adult Services. We want to welcome you to our annual Graves Matter program. It's important. It's an extension of my genealogy work here at the Broward County Libraries. And I've been doing genealogy for quite a while, about a couple of decades actually. And we realized that cemeteries give us a lot of information about our histories. And through this work, and I've done it now in several states, South Carolina, here, New York, Barbados, now Panama. I've reached out to Panama and it's been really fun. It's exciting, not even fun, exciting and spiritually led. And I'll talk more about that later. So I want to first open up this evening. It's important, Karen, would you please bring me a bottle of water, a small bottle of water? I wanted to talk a little bit about why this program started. We realized that we have a lot of cemeteries, not here just in South Florida, but also around the United States, around the world, that are neglected. And many of them are built over through development. Many of them are owned by private people and folks cannot get back to see their relatives without permission. And it happens everywhere around the world. And, you know, we realize that with those erasures goes our history. So that's why I began to become more interested in it. And I did a large project in Charleston, South Carolina, with my brother, who has since passed, Dr. Ade Afunyin, who's an anthropologist who went to UF. And we did an amazing reburial interment of 36 African remains that were found when they were redoing the Gilliard Auditorium in Charleston, South Carolina in 2013. It took us 5 years, but after we were able to do DNA on those bones with the help of Tennessee University, National Geo magazine, we also did DNAs of Gullah Geechee people living in the area to see if we could find connections. So it was a major project. And we also did some projects on some of the other barrier islands, Edisto Island and some of the other places. So that's kind of how I've been doing this work and kind of going with my spirit and how it leads me. And I think how I got led to Panama was the Museum Association of the Caribbean they have an annual conference and they move around. So this past November, they were in Panama. So I wanted to go and I found myself there, and I had the pleasure of meeting Betsy and John from UF at the Florida Society of Archivists meeting in Deerfield Beach back last February. And they did a presentation on their Panama collection up at UF, which they'll talk more about this evening. And I was so excited, you know, thinking that I was going to go to the conference. And so I said to them, you know, my interests. So I remember John said, "Do you know Frances?" And I'm like, "Frances?" He said, "Yeah, Frances Yearwood." And I said, "Is she Bayesian?" And he said, "I don't know." But so I called her, and Frances Williams Yearwood and I spoke for 2 hours. It was like we had known each other all our lives. And from that point, and that was last summer, I think. Well, it was right after February. Then we began to talk, and I started going to some of their meetings and so forth. And so Frances invited me to come to Panama to speak at a program, which she'll talk more about later today. And that was in November in Panama. So that's how it's been moving, you know. So when spirit moves you a certain way, you have to be quiet and still and go with it and you know, in this cultural heritage path that we've all taken. So I also want to take a moment and I want to pour a libation. And the reason why I want to pour a libation to open us up, but I also want to tell you a little bit about someone who we're paying tribute tonight. And that would be Dr. Enid Pinkney. And Dr. Pinkney was an amazing historic preservationist, Bahamian descent, and quite an amazing woman. And she was at our program last year. And wow, she just really gave us some gems, 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 gems. So I'm going to read a little bit about her, then we'll take a moment of silence. Preservation leader Enid Pinkney worked aggressively over the years to ensure that the role of African Americans in Miami's history was acknowledged and preserved. She was born the third of four children on October 15, 1931 in Miami-Dade County, Florida. She graduated from the all-black Booker T. Washington High School in Miami in 1949, receiving a BA from Talladega College in 1953 and an MS from Barry University in 1967. She worked as a social worker from 1953 to 55, after which she worked in Dade County Public School System until she retired as assistant principal at South Miami Middle School in 1991. She joined the Dade Heritage Trust Historic Preservation Organization in the mid-1980s while she was still at the school. She was elected the first Black president of the trust in 1998. She was the founder of the African American Committee, which focused on the contributions of Blacks to the community. She worked to preserve such historical sites as the landmark Brownsville Hotel, once the social and cultural epicenter of Black Miami during segregation. Pinkney successfully led a group to form the historic Hampton House Community Trust, working to save the hotel, which was declared a historical landmark in 2012. How many people have been to the historic Hampton House here? If so, would you show with the hands? Okay, so for those of you, you may recall there was a movie, Night in Miami, and it was about the meeting of three very important and famous people. Help me out. Somebody help me, yes. Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, and Muhammad Ali. So that was filmed at the historic Hampton House. It's a former hotel. It was owned, I can't remember his name. He was a Jewish gentleman, and but it was the only hotel that our people could stay, entertainers and so forth. So, it has the pool and everything. So for 20 some odd years, it was kind of a haven for drugs and all that. So Dr. Pinkney saved it and got the city to take it on, and now it's an amazing jewel, historical jewel. They do all kinds of events there. They have taken the hotel rooms where Dr. King and Malcolm stayed, and when you go in the room, you can hear Malcolm's speeches and various things like that. So it's amazing. If you ever are by the airport, you have a little time, it's one exit away from the airport. So try to see it. So she was also an unofficial historian for Brownsville, the North Central Dade community where she lived. She wrote a book and produced several videos on the history. And I can go on and on and on. But I want to tell you that we did lose her on July 18, 2024, at the age of 92. I happened to be at her 90th birthday party, and I have footage of her actually dancing to the dancers, Junkanoo dancers, the drummers and stuff, and it was amazing. She got up, she was just jamming. So I want to take a moment. These flowers are for her tonight, just to give thanks and honor to Dr. Enid Pinkney. We'll take a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you. So next, I'd like to bring up a colleague. Once again, I was doing the work around the cemeteries, and somebody said, there's a gentleman that you have to meet. He's doing genealogy and family history and cemetery work with high school students. And I'm like, what? Oh, yes, I've got to meet him because I'm an intergenerational addict. I believe that we as young elders and older elders sometimes suffer from adultism. And I think it's really important that we realize how important it is for us to connect with our younger people so we can pass the torch and light the way for them. They have the energy, the creativity, we have the experience, the wisdom. sometimes a strength still. And if we come together, what a wonderful match made in heaven that we can get work accomplished. So let me tell you a little bit, and it's not going to be long, about Roberto Fernandez III. We met at the cemetery Woodlawn, and Woodlawn is where Reuben Stacy is buried. Reuben Stacy, unfortunately, was lynched in 1935 here in Broward County, and so he's buried in there. So they had a soil retention project there where we actually gathered soil and we put them in these jars, and they were sent to the lynching museum down in Alabama, right? So that's how I met. So we have been doing work ever since, and we've done stuff around tours, and we did oral history programs, oral history 101s for the community, how do you take care and preserve your own records, those sorts of things. So I know that he's been with the school district about 2 decades. He's gotten awards and honors for being a history high school teacher. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on Roberto.
All right, good evening, everyone. Dr. Ray, thank you for hosting this. I know it's something that people in the community look forward to, so thank you for your leadership and advocacy of this program. Our cemeteries matter. Good evening, everyone. I'm Roberto. I use he, they pronouns. I'm a historian here in Broward County. And I guess one of the things I'd like to do, and I'm going to borrow water again, I want to do a couple of acknowledgments myself. First, I want to acknowledge that the land that we occupy here in Florida, and really the land that goes from Canada all the way down to Argentina, was originally indigenous. And through conquest and colonization and development, we have the countries and the communities that we have today. So I do want to recognize all of the indigenous people that were here before the conquest of the Americas. I also want to recognize that the African Americans, or the African diaspora people that reside in the Caribbean and the Americas, have a history that began way before the enslavement period and the transatlantic trade, and had civilizations of Ghana, Mali, Ghana, and Songhai. We know of the Aksumite Empire. We know of the Zimbabwe Empire, the Egyptian civilization. So I just want to acknowledge those ancestors as well this evening. All right, so I guess what's the connection with Broward County and Panama? I'm sure that's a question that some of you guys have been wondering, like, why do we have a local historian up here? So as many of you have traveled throughout Broward County, I'm sure you have noticed the plethora of canals that we have here in Broward. All right, Broward, when it was originally developed, probably up to the turnpike would have been pinelands, and then west of that would have been swamp. All right, and the Everglades, really. And so around 1906, this guy called Napoleon Bonaparte Broward was elected governor with this idea that he was going to drain the swamp and start developing agriculture, especially in this area here that we now call Broward County. So Broward County derives its name because of Governor Napoleon Bonaparte Broward. And so in 1906, they got the dredges and they started actually building out the first of the canals as part of the governor's initiative to drain the Everglades. And so about 1910, we start seeing migration out of Panama. So some of the people that started building the Panama Canal were starting to kind of look for their own homes, and they were looking for cheap land. And so they found that cheap land in a city that we today call Davie. But at the time, it was just, cheap land. When a lot of them started buying the land and living on it and setting up their homesteads, initially that land was called, or that area was called Zona. And the Zona name comes from the Panama Canal Zone. And so, people who have worked in Panama, lived in Panama, know that that area, a lot of people refer to them as Zonians within the Panama Canal Zone. And so that's one of our links, is from 1910 forward, a lot of the builders of the canals here in Broward County, many of them were actually people who helped build the canal in Panama. And so that's one of our connections here. Just for a quick little history tour, if you'd like, There are locks, like original locks from the original canals that were built here in Broward County. And the ones that I think are the best example are the Sewell locks, which are off of State Road 84, just west of Davie Road on 595. So if you're going, you get off at the exit at Davie and you kind of keep going, there's a little park. You have to not miss it, or you'll have to do the circle and come back around to get into it. But they have the original locks. It is a historic site here in Broward County. And there is, interestingly enough, although I can't tell you more of the story because I haven't tracked anyone down that can tell me, although I've tried, I did notice on Google Maps a couple of years ago that the canal in front of the Plantation golf course is actually called the Panama Canal. But again, I'm like, why? The only why, my hypothesis is the builders decided that they wanted to think of home a little bit and make that link for us. So there is, if you look on Google, right outside and you zoom close enough, you'll see it says Panama Canal here in Broward County. I do want to recognize that aside from that old history, we do have a lot of migration here in Broward County, and we do have a lot of Panamanians that reside within Broward. I know this firsthand and with personal experience. My wife is Panamanian. She was born in Panama. Only recently did she tell me about her experience as a child during the American invasion of Panama in '89. And so her family migrated here in the early 1990s. And so she attended Flanagan High School, was part of that first opening class at Flanagan High School. And so my daughters are also in the district, and they've worn their polleras and stuff like that to honor their Hispanic heritage. I'm Puerto Rican and Cuban myself, so I try to push that one, but they are more Panamanian technically. And I do want to just give a quick shout out to my family in Panama as well. When they saw the flyer, I don't know how they saw the flyer. I called Dr. Ray like a couple of days after they reached out to my wife and said like, hey, I didn't know he was doing this. And I'm like, I didn't know it went that far. So I do want to just recognize my family and just appreciate all of that. So with that said, I'd like to introduce one of our next speakers, Dr. Antoinette Jackson. She is professor and chair of anthropology at the University of South Florida. She is the founder of the Black Cemetery Network, and she's just an outstanding colleague. I've known her for a long time because of my work with Woodlawn, and really because of also the collaborations that we've done as part of these annual events on cemeteries. So can we connect to Dr. Jackson?
Hello.
There she is.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm sorry I can't be there in the room to partake of not only the refreshments, but the fellowship. So I miss not being there. But I want to thank Dr. Ray and everyone for inviting me once again to this Grave Matters series at the library, at the Broward County Library. It's always exciting to me to hear the topics that are presented and also get a chance to, share the work that's being done around the country, as you were hearing, around Black cemetery erasure and the need for Black cemetery preservation. And I just wanted to highlight and remind everyone again and invite those of you, especially around the state of Florida, who are partaking in preservation of Black cemeteries, to visit the Black Cemetery Network site. And all you have to do is type in Black Cemetery Network. You'll get to a beautiful website and page where you will see we have now, it's grown from 11 sites that started in 2021 to over 185 sites of representing people all around the country who are working to preserve Black cemeteries in various states of erasure or and/or restoration. And so it is a very excellent site to find out what people are doing, how you can get involved. And it's also a platform whereby people who maybe seem isolated and working on their own particular cemetery to get those cemeteries known in a broader fashion, and to show that we're not alone and there's strength in numbers. So that was the motivation for my team and I starting the Black Cemetery Network. We were doing a lot of preservation work right here. I'm in Tampa, right here in the Tampa Bay area with cemeteries from Tampa, like Zion Cemetery, which sits underneath the Robles Park housing complex, and St. Petersburg, where cemeteries are sitting under I-275 and underneath the parking lot of what was Tropicana Field. So it's lots of work to be done all over the country. So these kinds of programs and the work that each of you are doing, even just by listening and learning more about this type of effort, is very important and very significant. So I always just want to take the opportunity to invite people to the Black Cemetery Network, and it's very easy to find. And we're always adding sites. And tonight, I'm very excited to listen and learn more about the cemeteries in Panama. I had a recent opportunity over the last month to start to learn about some of the cemeteries and the history that we're going to hear about today. And I'm looking forward to having those cemeteries added to the network, and also to say that we're really expanding the network to include the Caribbean and Panama and sites like that. So this will be the first launch of those sites with the entry of these sites from Panama. So we're working, or we will be working, to have those sites added. And just by being added, again, it raises the visibility, we hope, and puts pressure on people to really start to pay attention and know that those cemeteries are not isolated, that they're in conversation with other places and people around the country, and now around the world and around the Caribbean. So again, I want to say thank you. And if you have any questions for me, like I said, either email me through the Black Cemetery Network or through my university at USF. And we are always looking forward to helping, answering questions, and really dealing with this issue of Black cemetery erasure. We don't want this to continue, and we want to be in the forefront of preserving Black cemeteries and Black history. So I don't want to take much more time, because I too want to hear the program. So thank you all, and sorry I cannot be there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. So our next speaker, wow, I have so much in my heart to say about her, but I'm going to be brief. I want to bring up Frances Williams Yearwood. She was the founder of the CGM Cemetery Foundation, and she'll tell you what CGM stands for. I don't want to take a long time for introduction, but I will tell you that she's been doing this work about a decade now, and she's on it. She's on it. Lots of good information. Frances, please.
Well, she did say when we first spoke, we spoke for 2 hours. And anybody that knows me knows that that's real. But I only have 10 minutes. So go figure. But first of all, I'd just like to welcome everyone here this evening, Dr. Ray and the African American Cultural Center for inviting us, giving us a platform to share about CGM, the Corozal Gatun Cemetery Preservation Foundation in Panama. Graves matter, why it matters from our perspective, my perspective. And I want to really extend a shout out to the diaspora, particularly those living in South Florida. Thank you for being here. It truly is an honor. Please allow me to go back. Slides, yes. Just give you a little background history. Promise not to be too long. Marcus Garvey famously wrote, "A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and country is like a tree without roots." And as Dr. Ray said earlier, cemeteries are the preservation of history. For me, cemeteries are for the living. They are there to comfort us, educate us, and it provides a peaceful place. Many of us can remember Corozal Cemetery or even Mount Hope, years and years ago, it was like a park. And you could go and relax and just have conversations with your family. I thought it was a crazy thing back then, but God knew in his infinite wisdom when he was going to call on me. And here I am. Just to give you an overview of the West Indians or Caribbeans or Antillians, as you know, whichever generation you're from and you're comfortable with. The construction of the Panama Canal attracted over 200 migrants, Caribbean migrants during the 19th and 20th centuries, seeking employment and dreams of a better life for their families. Most were of African descent, typically called West Indians, and later on, as time went on, they were called Antillians, later West Indians. Working for the Panama Canal, those who got to Panama, got employment, was very, very hard. Conditions were poor. It was a hostile environment. Wages were extremely low, and racial discrimination. The US, and perhaps even the French, because they owned the project before, instituted segregated systems, gold and silver systems, for pay, benefits, and to keep the Jim Crow law that was enacted here in the United States to separate people by nationality and race was rampant in Panama at that time. So I grew up in a Jim Crow environment. We lived in our communities, we were comfortable, and it was fine for us. However, our parents or grandparents dealt with the segregation at home, and at work they had to go. So it really created a challenging circumstances for Caribbeans that came to Panama and had to survive those initial years. It was impact of the Panamanian society. Panama, just as you had in the US, or the Caribbeans suffering under Jim Crow, Panama also was very resentful of the Caribbeans, primarily because of the grievances that existed with the United States, just from a political standpoint, the founding of Panama, from Colombia, and so on. Many of you know that stories. And it was not until the 1940s that children born to Caribbeans in Panama were granted citizenships. We were not allowed to be Panamanians, pretty similar to what we have here called birthright. Panama did not have that until the mid 1940s. Well, by the time I was born, then I was a born Panamanian, but my parents had to, their national ID said extranjeros until that law passed allowing us. So for many, many decades, we were sort of like a country without a home. Eventually, many wanted to go back to the Caribbean, but thousands stayed, shaping the culture, the gastronomy, and contributing to the economic prosperity of Panama. Despite all of that, and the early years where thousands died during constructions, and not given proper burials. Later on, we find cemeteries today that are totally neglected. Despite the vital role that the Caribbeans contributed, they've been overlooked in history, overshadowed by the American engineering achievements of the canal construction, and hardly any mention of the Caribbean and others who built and it's their Black lives as far as my Caribbean ancestry is concerned, that built the canal and have not gotten the recognition that they have. They've been marginalized throughout history. And it's played out even in the cemeteries that we are trying to preserve today. And it's important that they're preserved because during construction, many towns and burial grounds were flooded and wiped away. So today, we only have the cemeteries of Corozal, Gatun, and Mount Hope, where we can say this is where our ancestors are buried. Even the communities, those on the Canal Zone, we're not talking about, there are Caribbeans that lived in Panama City and chose to live in Panama City and just came and worked for the Panama Canal. But those that lived on the Canal Zone, many of those communities are no longer the communities that I knew as a child growing up. And frankly, going home to the cemeteries is as close as it gets for me as far as a community is concerned. I see my neighbors, I see my teachers, I see my parents, my grandparents, my friends' parents, and so on. So it's really, really an important task to ensure that we maintain it. The government that's responsible for these cemeteries are neglectful as well. Many have not claimed there's no funding for the cemeteries. Let me see if I can go on here. Please pardon me. Oh, I have it in my hand. Here are the three cemeteries that we are talking about this evening. Corozal Cemetery on the Pacific side, it's 55 acres, opened in 1914, has approximately 26,000 buried there. These numbers are plus or minus as it's taken from the Gorgas Hospital's mortuary records. But when I went back in 2016, this is the condition of Corozal Cemetery. And it's a perpetual thing every year. This is what happens because lack of maintenance and attendance and care. Mount Hope Cemetery, 75 acres, opened in the mid 1800s, I would say. That was really the first cemetery. Last year when I was there, they were up to about 62,000 because that cemetery is still used as a municipal cemetery for the city of Colon. However, that photo that you see there is a photo of what the West Indian sections looks like. People cannot find their loved ones. Gatun Cemetery is on the banks of the canal, goes back to the 1800s. It's a very small cemetery. Probably people who lived in the city of Gatun were buried there, and there's some French and Americans there. The ACP now cuts that grass because it's not an easy access cemetery to get to. But it's nevertheless, there are people from the the railroad, French construction, and the Panama Canal that are buried in that section. And then these last two photos that I show you, the bottom right and middle, is the Silver Cemetery at Corozal. This is the condition that it looks in. And then on the very same cemetery, there's the American Cemetery that is well maintained. It is now a military cemetery. So the Americans, or the military, takes care of that cemetery. And the Silver Cemetery, where the Panamanians and West Indians are buried, are to be maintained, or they're the responsibilities of the Panamanian government. These 3 cemeteries were declared historical landmarks in 2012. And as such, they should be maintained by the government. And that was in 2012. By 2016, when it was brought to my attention, when I had my outcry at the cemetery over the conditions, the cemeteries had not been cut in 4 years. It was truly, truly a sad, sad sight to see. And many, many people don't go to the cemeteries because the last vision of what they experience visiting the cemetery is what they've held on to, and they feel hopeless. They feel it was taken care of when the Americans was here. What happened? Well, at the end of the day, those are our people. And we'll continue to fight the governments, but those are our people. And we can't allow ourselves to be caught up with, political disputes, whose responsibilities they are, because at the end of the day, they're our families. And that was the outcry of CGM when we came together in 2017, reached out to the diaspora and said, you know what, we have to come together. It is our duty, our responsibilities to preserve these cemeteries, give our ancestors their due respect in their place of rest, and also to ensure that we can hand this off to a next generation that will take care and know who they are, where they came from, and why is it so important that we preserve the cemeteries. So CGM has been formed, and we've had many, many accomplishments over the years, in the last 7 years. Today, we maintain over 50 graves of families in the diaspora that are abroad that reached out to CGM. We located their family graves, and we maintain it today. We are in conversations with each entity. One of the challenges with our cemeteries is that even though they're historical landmarks and they're under one government, they're all handled differently. And the Mikultura, which is the Agency for Patrimony, they want to deal with Corozal only. So we went from 0 cuts to 9 cuts a year, but there is really, really, that cemetery requires a lot of work as well. Certainly not as much as Mount Hope, which Corelia, as my colleague, will share a little bit more about Mount Hope when she comes on. We've enacted an Adopt a Grave program. I don't see the photos here. Oh, yes, the photos. The far left photos are photos of over 300 graves that we uncovered that were under inches of dirt. And I like to say we got them up and they came up for fresh air. And so these are burials from the late 30s to early 40s. Many of the families have left. Many are in the Caribbean, never heard from their families again. There's just a host of reasons why these graves are not being maintained. So CGM is proud to have offered an Adopt a Grave program that someone other than their own families, if they're willing to just maintain that grave, that it would be, that's an opportunity. Here are CGM at work. We have been on televisions, we've been on radio stations, we've marched, we've done everything to bring awareness. Cemeteries is not a sexy thing. Cemeteries are not, come on, there's a gala dance next week. And how we package it, how we reach people to especially a younger generation, 3 and 4 generations that have not been born in Panama. How do we get them connected and involved? Because it's only through them that this history will go on. There's photo 1, what the cemetery looked like, and I think that's my grandmother's grave. Look at the cut around it. It's almost embarrassing to go and cut around your grandmother's grave while you step over 30 graves to get to it, you know. But we do it one grave at a time. There's another family from New York that she reached out to us, and since we found her father's grave. That's the middle photo. And his wife's grave is on the other, the pink grave. That's a husband and a wife. So many heartwarming stories. The first row is Juana Lopez's story. She was a housekeeper for an American family. She raised 11 of this American family's children and 7 of her own. And when CGM, this family heard about CGM, I think it was John at one of the annual family reunions the Americans host here in Orlando, they reached out to me to help find Juana's grave. Took us a long time, but we found Juana's grave. Juana's grave is now being maintained, and that family adopted a grave next to Juana and are paying to maintain an unknown grave, but we take good care of Juana. The second story is a family in, a young boy was away at college in Boston, and he heard about CGM. He reached out to us and asked us if we could help locate his great-grandfather's grave. His grandfather had lost with the conditions of the cemetery, his grandfather could no longer find his father's grave. Took us a while, but you had to dig rows and rows of, it just had a marker. And we got it there and we found it. Mr. Holness died 1.5 years later, but it pleases our hearts to know that he found his father's grave from 1942. And here is his 5th and 6th generation family now maintaining. They've provided a plaque and they maintain. And the last story is a woman in Maryland who was a first generation born in the US. Her father would send money home to take care of his mother and father's grave. For years, as a little girl, she grew up hearing that her father was taking these monies home. And when she heard about CGM, she reached out to us, and she now maintains her grandfather and grandmother's grave. And finally went to see those graves, I think it was last year that she went, prior to her being a young little girl. So these are the things that are important. This is a story of Teddy. Teddy, Nydia Thomas is a great-granddaughter, and she found her grandfather's grave from the 1930s, and she now takes care of that grave. We are approaching a time where those that have joined CGM in 7 years are getting older, we're getting tired, and we know now that it's going to require a newer, younger generation to come on board, to bring their talent, to bring their creativity and their passion to carry on this important work. I am proud to introduce Corelia Perez, who is the third or fourth generation, correct? No, maybe she's about a fourth generation or fifth generation Colonensa, living in Virginia, that has accepted to be the next president for CGM here in the US. We have a lot of challenges ahead, and we're very, very excited that Corelia has taken on the torch, or allowed me to hand her over the torch, that she may be able to carry this for the next few years. So I thank you, and without further ado, Corelia.
Thank you. Thank you, Francis, and especially to Dr. Ray for hosting this amazing and much needed discussion. It's truly an honor to be here today as president-elect of CGM Foundation. Being part of this organization means so much to me, just because, well, not just because of the important work that we do, but it's deeply personal. My family's history is rooted in Panama, especially the cemeteries. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, and many of my relatives are all laid to rest, especially in Mount Hope Cemetery. So for me, preserving these sites is just more than a task. It's definitely a legacy for me. So I often go and visit the cemetery, and seeing firsthand the environment really strengthened my commitment to this cause. I believe our work today honors those who came before us. And by preserving these sacred sites, we give future generations a tangible link to their heritage. So thank you again. And together we'll definitely continue to honor the past while building a stronger future. So if we can go to the next slide, please. I can't see it, so I hope we're on slide 9. So as we work to protect these important sites, there are a few challenges here. One of the biggest ones is that many of us who have been looking after the cemeteries are getting older. So we really need younger generations, both here and in the diaspora, to set up and help take on this responsibility. Everyone has a role to play, especially keeping places like this meaningful. So also the tropical climate, that's pretty tough. It has its own set of challenges. The heat, the humidity, and the rain wear down the headstones and the monuments over time, and the structures start to weaken. So we can't afford to wait until they're beyond repair. We have to come and protect them now. So overgrowth is also a big issue. If these cemeteries aren't maintained regularly, then the vegetation takes over quickly, making it tough to access and find care for the graves properly. There's also a need for more people to understand just how important these cemeteries are to our history. By raising awareness, both locally and within the diaspora, we can bring in the support and the funding necessary to preserve them. And on top of this, as Ms. Francis did mention, each cemetery, Corozal, Gatun, and Mount Hope, they're managed differently by government agencies. So it becomes tricky to coordinate everything. So it's going to take some teamwork and a lot of collaboration, but I'm sure that we can take it. It's no small task, but again, together, we can make this effort and it can become a beautiful thing and history. Can we go to the next slide, please? Slide 10. Again, I can't see the slide, so I hope you guys can see it. So I'm really excited about this one. This year, we're definitely focusing on Mount Hope Cemetery. It's located in Colón, Panama. The cemetery was established in the mid-1800s and became the final resting place for many workers and residents who helped build the Panama Railroad and especially the Panama Canal. So including Caribbeans, we got Chinese, we got the Jewish, and tons of other immigrants that have been laid to rest there. So over time, the cemetery has definitely suffered from the tropical climate and the lack of maintenance, making preservation even more urgent. And to tackle this, we want to continue our work closely with the government, including Mi Cultura and the municipality of Colón, along with our CGM Panama chapter and our sister organization, Pan-Caribbean Sankofa. And we also look forward to other Afro-Panamanian groups like SAMAP to join our efforts. Together, we're aligned and we want to protect and restore and maintain these sites, funding, raising awareness, and just aligning our efforts. That's our goal. for 2025. We also want to expand our outreach to both the local Panamanian community and the global diaspora to ensure long-term support. So looking ahead, though, in 2025, we're focused on grant writing. That's going to be a big key here to find new funding sources, ensuring sustainability for our projects. We're also going to continue our important work of digitizing our records, which we have been doing. So they're accessible to anyone and preserved for the public and for future generations if they start having an interest in this. So in the years to come, moving beyond 2025, we do hope to create a commemorative monument at Mount Hope and Gatun Cemetery, similar to the one that we did in Corozal Cemetery. So these monuments we want as a pillar to honor those who contributed to the canal's construction and Panama's history and keep their legacies alive. We're also exploring the creation of a library and museum in Corozal Cemetery to serve as like an educational hub, which will be used to preserve historical records, photographs, and artifacts of that sort. So if you would like to see and get a glimpse of history, Corozal would be that main hub there. So I know I just said a lot, but I'm really, really excited about the future and grateful for everyone's continued support. I'll definitely now pass it over to my beautiful and amazing colleague, Casma, to share more. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Casma Coburn-Henlon from one of the directors from Pan-Caribbean Sankofa. Kind of took me a little by surprise. You may ask, and this is to everyone watching, not just us here, why is caring for cemeteries so important? We've tried to highlight the reasons and the information presented to you today. The takeaway that we want you to have is that we can only truly know who we are when we know those who came before us, setting the path to the future. And there is so much to learn by taking care of their final resting places. Not only can we learn from situations surrounding their departure, but we are given the unique opportunity to honor our forebears by showing them to be worthy of acknowledgement and respect because of the examples that they left us in their contributions to an event of historic proportions. As we learn, we share, and as we share, we add to the knowledge base of who we are as people. These actions give credibility to our assertions that we as people mean something in a historic context. How can you help, you may ask? Think of these three words: donate, share, and advocate. There are many opportunities to donate your time, money, expertise, and talents. You can spread the word about our efforts, and you can join us in the effort of pulling off this grand plan that we have. We are a passionate group of people determined to make a difference. One unusual partnership that we share is with the Panama Canal Museum collection staff at the University of Florida in Gainesville. They bring the academic know-how and expertise, and we bring the passion, pride, and community pulse to bear on recording oral histories and of those who worked on the construction and maintenance of the Panama Canal or lived on the canal zone during the years that the canal was operated by the Panama Canal Company. I believe that Dr. Ray will now make some introductions. Thank you.
Thank you, Cosma. Once again, this will be brief. I'd like to bring up John Nemes. He serves as the interim associate chair of the Panama Canal Museum Collection at the Smothers Library, University of Florida, Gainesville.
Good evening. I am so happy to be here in your lovely center. This is my first time here. I also have a PowerPoint loaded. Do you? Okay, desktop. I got it. Perfect, thank you. I'm going to keep this brief. I've enjoyed hearing everybody speak so far. And I also love the segue that we got from Corellia and from Casma about the interest in library and museums. And that's what we're doing here tonight is we're going to be talking to my colleague and I, Betsy Bemis, about how our collection supports everything that CGM and Pan-Caribbean Sankofa and our allied organizations are working on. Our collection, just to give you some quick background, was established in 2012 at the University of Florida. We focus on primarily the 20th century of the history of the canal, but honestly, we're interested in the history of Panama. We're interested in the history of the Caribbean. We have a very large and vibrant Latin American Caribbean collection at the University of Florida. And we're very interested in documenting the stories of the people about the canal and about Panama's history. Oh, on my screen it is not. I'm sorry, I switched it the other way. Thank you very much for showing me, telling me that. Let me try that again. There we go. Thank you very much. We collect anything and everything, archival materials, print materials. In this slide, I'm just showing a few examples here of some objects that we collect for research, for classes, exhibits. The object on the right you see there is actually a payroll that shows some of the Caribbean workers and their pay wages they would have received during the construction of the canal. And then on the right, we have some objects that were donated actually by community members. We love to collect materials from the community and about the community. We also love sharing these resources. And this is the way we most directly support everything that CGM and Pan-Caribbean Sankofa do. We have a very strong digitization program at the University of Florida. We partner with other institutions, including the Florida International University, and we have been involved for many years in the Digital Library of the Caribbean, or DLOC as it's known. And we freely share our resources online as long as we're able to. We put them online so that everybody has access to them. We also work with SAMAP, as Corellia was mentioning earlier, and with the National Library in Panama to contribute resources from all over that relate to these histories. And here's an example here of school yearbooks from the Caribbean community, and then newspapers that were by and about the Caribbean community in Panama. I'm going to invite my colleague, Betsy Bemis, to come up and take over for me.
Sorry, thanks, John. So thank you, Dr. Ray. It's so great to see you again, and all of my beautiful, amazing colleagues and friends from Caribbean Sankofa, and those of you who I know. So one of the other ways I wanted to just share, many of you are interested in cemetery work, history work, and or your own personal genealogy. And some of the ways that a special collection or an archive can help you in those quests and in those family journeys are through historic photographs. So many special collections and libraries have very extensive collections of locations throughout time, through different decades, that can help you understand what a space might have looked like throughout time. And particularly when we work with Fran and CGM, that this can be a tool to help you advocate to a government. This is what a cemetery used to look like. This is how it used to be maintained. So it's a very good way to put a visual emphasis behind your efforts and behind what you're doing. So these are some examples of photographs that we have of some of the historic cemeteries that exist now, and then some that have been torn down, that were graves of diggers of the Panama Canal. We also have documents, maps, and newspapers. These are other ways, things that archives and special collections might have that would help you, how we help CGM. We help them locate a map of Mount Hope Cemetery, which will be a part of that work, that grave restoration. We know now that where the section is, the old West Indian section and maybe a new West Indian section, and it'll help them navigate the landscape and in help in locating graves. We have old publications. So this is a publication that in working with CGM, we are able to look through old things and know when the cemetery in Corozal was established, because we can find that through old newspapers and old company publications, that the things the Pan Canal put out. So we have official documentation that helps us know when the cemeteries were built, changes that happened over time, when they were expanded. We have government documents. This is a Senate hearing that was about the turnover of the canal in the 70s. And Fran and I have looked at this extensively in trying to figure out when things happened, what happened to some of the graves, what happens during this transition of power from the United States taking care of this cemetery to Panama. So we have government documents that would help in that. And certainly then we have an extensive digitization program of newspapers, of community newspapers that were printed in Panama at the time, that have announcements of funeral services. And many of these things are text searchable. So you could search your family name, search a loved one's name, and it might tell you something about their funeral. It could help you locate a grave, help you locate where their final resting place might be. And we also assist CGM with other collections and archives. We have expertise, and sometimes looking through these things can be difficult for a layperson. There's a language, there's a rhythm and a vocabulary to working in libraries and special collections that sometimes is difficult. So we definitely help them do that. We've accessed numerous different types of databases, and the Gorgas mortuary records that I know CGM works with all the time. We've helped organize that for Fran in a specific way. And when we were at Mount Hope, all as a group together, they had started to try to digitize some of the logbooks of the graves that they maintained and that were held in the cemetery. And we have that. We've certainly shared that with Fran, and we're working now to help them gain access to the records that are in the National Archives about the burials in Mount Hope. And you can see some of these things that we've taken. John and I were on a research trip there, and these are some boxes, the roll of microfilm that we're working to digitize, and then some of the handwritten logs that are just beautiful, extraordinary historical documents of that. These are logbooks that the men that worked in the cemetery would have kept and hand wrote where graves were and who was buried while they were going throughout their day. We've mentioned Pan-Caribbean Sankofa. We have an extraordinary oral history project that we work with, where members of Sankofa are interviewing Caribbean workers, people that grandparents came and dug the canal, and then who lived and worked at the canal throughout the 20th century. And we preserve those, make them digitally available for anyone to look at. I encourage all of you to do it. Here is a small list, and thank you to everyone that's participated. These are some of the interviews that they've done, and certainly carrying on the very important work that Mr. Carlos Aline, who is here with us tonight, started, and he is represented here in some of these oral histories. So thank you to everyone that's participated, done interviews, been interviewed. It's an extraordinary gift that you're giving to the future, to the preservation of this history. We have a lot of other great initiatives too. We have a YouTube channel that we manage with Sankofa that has a lot of our events, videos. We put together some things for Black History Month in Panama. I encourage all of you to go look there. It's really fun, and a lot of great cooking. You'll see Carmen, who's here with us tonight, and her family doing extraordinary recipes. Get jealous that we're not there in their kitchen. And then this Memory Lane was a really incredible community event we hosted with Sankofa at the university in September 2022. Sure, sorry about that. So here's some pictures from the event, and we really had a fabulous time, and it was an extraordinary, really fabulous time for everybody involved. This is Roman Foster, the gentleman that created the documentary Diggers. Some of you might be familiar with, that's him on the bottom there. And this is a little TikTok video about the event. we had a lot of fun, as you might be able to see. So thank you very much. John and I are here if anybody has any questions for us about ways that we might be able to help you preserve your own family history, or what an archive and a special collection might be able to help you with in your own quest for genealogical research or grave preservation. Please let us know.
At this time, I'd like my three guests to come up, join us on the podium, please. The three of you? Yes. I also want to tell you that Betsy Bemis serves as the Associate Curator of the Museum Panama Canal Collection at UF as well. No problem, no problem. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, then we're going to open it up to the audience, and I'm going to ask, when we have audience questions, if Roberto might be able to help me with the mic, getting the mic around, okay? So a couple of things that came up as we were talking that I made notes of. This is for Fran. Fran, you mentioned that there was a West Indian section in Mount Hope. Are there other sections, and what are those sections?
Yeah, well, Mount Hope Cemetery is divided.
There's a mic, you have a mic? Mhm. Okay.
Mount Hope Cemetery, is it better? Mount Hope Cemetery. Mount Hope Cemetery is huge. There's a Jewish section, there's Chinese, there's Muslim section. There was an American section at one time. And then there's, within the West Indian section, there is the West Indian babies. There was West Indians during a particular period. So there's a whole section that's carved out that's called the West Indian section, where you would assume it's predominantly where all the Caribbean Blacks and Panamanians are buried.
Okay, okay. And did you say that they're still burying there? Did you mention
Yeah,
that?
Mount Hope is really in the city of Cologne.
Right.
It was part of the building of Cologne, correct, Betsy? And that's the only cemetery in the city of Cologne. So regardless of it being a historical landmark, they shut down Corozal, they shut down Gatun, obviously for Gatun where it's located, but Mount Hope is for the city of Cologne. So it is, even when the US managed it, it was still managed by the US, but it was still the city of Cologne's cemetery. So the municipality continues to bury there, and we're really at the mercy of their funding. And Cologne is, all municipalities, every 4 or 5 years that there's a new government, they go through the same issue of not having funds and so on. So yes, it is an open cemetery.
Okay, thank you. You also mentioned that 50 graves are maintained in Corozal. How were those 50 graves determined? Who's funding it? Why only 50, or who?
Well,
how did you
when
come up
we
with that?
when we initially had this outcry to the diaspora to come together as a community, help us locate your family's grave, contribute to the maintenance, because even though the government is cutting the grass, they are not doing individual beautification of any headstone and so on. So this outcry, those 50 families that we maintain, they live abroad. So they reached out to CGM, we found the graves, we got someone to clean it up, and now they pay annually or quarterly or bi-yearly, and we have someone to go in and clean the grave monthly, take pictures and send it back home and so on.
Great, thank you. And
So we
then,
facilitate the process.
okay. Then my next question is for UF people. The oral history trainings, you had a list. You said it's not yet available online, but is there a list of the surnames available of people that you've interviewed for the oral histories?
We do have an individual project page for Sankofa on our website that you can access. It doesn't necessarily have, if the interview itself isn't online, there isn't necessarily a list of surnames. That's something I would certainly be happy to share. We try to get the interviews themselves online as quickly as possible.
Right, no, I understand.
Something that does slow the process down is a transcript. We'd like for people to be able to access and do research. So if someone tells an extraordinary experience about, playing sports as a youth, that you could search them by subject. You could learn and enhance your understanding about what it like to live in this space. So the transcripts are really valuable tools as well. So we try to put the interviews themselves where the name and the surname would be searchable.
Right.
So you can search our digital database for a surname itself. And I encourage all of you to do that. In addition to the oral history that you might find, you would find yearbook photos, their names in the newspaper, anniversaries, promotions if they worked for the canal themselves. We have a tremendous amount of serial publications, newspapers, and magazines that were published in Panama and the Canal Zone at the time. Digitized, fully text searchable. Please look at the website, and there's so much extraordinary information there that you could see faces of loved ones and learn about that past.
Okay, thank you. I understand that UF is on the cutting edge of AI work, artificial intelligence. I'm wondering, are you using any AI in your particular area?
Not yet, but that is something we have talked about quite a bit, as a matter of fact. And I think you're getting at that with your previous question too, in the sense that there's so much to be done in terms of mining that data and getting it names and getting it subjects, as Betsy was just saying. So we have some ideas of things that we would like to do along those lines. It would be wonderful if we could partner with some of our AI folks on campus to take all of the data that we have, all of those newspapers, all of those government reports, and be able to do something AI magic with them that I'm not an expert on, but I imagine there is some magic that can be done with them. So that what comes out the other side is something that, again, as Betsy was saying, you can sit and put in a simple search and you will know, okay, here is this person, this one individual, here's their yearbook photo, here is the photo of the cemetery where they're buried, and we're hoping that can be an automated process.
Right, okay.
Good question, thank you.
Almost sounds like Ancestry.com. Huh? Yes. Okay, at this time, I'd like to open it up to the audience. And Roberto, if you have a question, just raise your hand and he'll bring the mic to you. Would you please identify your name and where you're from, if you don't mind?
Hello, thank you so much for these really fascinating presentations. Thank you to Dr. Ramona LaRoche for organizing this really interesting event. My name is Katie Coldiron, and I work at Florida International University Library, specifically as the Outreach Program Manager for the Digital Library of the Caribbean. So I have two questions. The first is more about UF because I'm a UF alum, and I remember from my time there, the fact that there was this really important Panamanian collection there. And I'd always understood it kind of started with folks, mainly those from the continental US living in the zone. And it seems like from this presentation, it proves that obviously you've expanded beyond that initial group of people. And so I'm just really curious if you could tell me a little bit about the evolution of that, of your Panamanian projects at the university. And then my second question, given current events, and specifically the statements by the current U.S. president that we apparently are taking the canal back because the U.S. built it. No, the West Indians built it. So I'm just curious for all of you, just, if you're thinking about your work within the context of what's going on now and all these polemics surrounding the Panama Canal.
Thanks, Katie. Feel free to jump in, Betsy. I'll start. But so I think the first question is fairly easy to address, which is yes, the origin of the collection. We had been collecting on Panamanian history at the University of Florida for decades as part of our Latin American Caribbean collection. But the origin of our Panama Canal Museum collection specifically is the American community, who many of them they lived for generations in the former canal zone and in Panama. When the canal was being transferred to Panama in the late 90s, a lot of those Americans were coming to the States and decided that they wanted to preserve their history as people who had lived and worked on the canal for most of the 20th century. So they established a community museum in Seminole, Florida. They operated it for about 14 years and realized they weren't really sustainable. They were an aging population, and they wanted to make sure that there was some assuredness that their materials would be preserved and used far into the future. Long story short, they ended up donating their collection to the University of Florida. We immediately, we continue to collect their stories aggressively, but we also collect in the Caribbean population. We would like to collect indigenous population stories from that period. And certainly we've been collecting Panamanian viewpoints. So I think that addresses the first question, in that we've expanded to try and tell all stories if we can. The second part of the question I will answer quickly to say, I'm really not a historian or political expert. We get this, we've been asked this question by some members of the press, and I'm using the word press loosely there because some of the people who contact us, I don't know how true press they are.
Pressing they are.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just not an expert in this. I think we're going to continue to have this conversation as this plays out. And I think it's Betsy and I were talking about it on our trip down here from Gainesville, that I think it's something that we're going to get this question more frequently. I'm not a political expert and have that sense of how that could play out. We'll be documenting it as it happens.
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the really beautiful and important things about archives and special collections is that they are there to preserve, the historical reality of a situation. And we're there for anyone that is interested, layperson, the public, a politician, to come and look at material that will teach you the reality, or, will help you understand the reality of the situation. And so, although, it is not our responsibility or job to, answer those questions or speak to that, it is our job to make sure the information is there so that someone could educate themselves on the truth. So we are an important part of that conversation. Don't want to necessarily participate in it publicly, but truly anyone that is interested in learning more. We have a lot of information about construction, and we have a lot of information about the treaty and transfer period. And we're here to serve everyone and help share and spread that information.
I know you didn't ask me, but I'd like to comment on that. Yeah, no, that's okay. I just want to make reference to the fact that this is why our preservation of our ancestry is so important, and it means so much to us, because especially when you're away and you're abroad, I have 2 and 3 generations behind me that hear that and have no point of reference but what they hear on TV and who they have to believe, because that's supposed to be, someone of authority, and it's misinformation. And that this is why we do what we have to do for our 200,000 and our thousands that were not even mentioned in that conversation. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, another question?
Hi, good evening. My name is Mahalia Joseph, and I was born there, a daughter of Panamanians, one of which was from the Canal Zone, and whose father is buried in Mount Hope. But the question, because time is of the essence, in terms of preserving your independence from funding that may come from the government. Unfortunately, I read a day or two ago that the National Archives director in the history of the archives was fired or let go by the current president. And so I know that a lot of things that you get, some of which comes from the National Archives, in terms of your funding and your ability to continue as an unbiased but truth-telling group, do you have enough independence where you don't have to worry about how funding is happening in the government? Or does it require more from us, whoever us is, to help keep the doors open?
And that's directed to whom? The UF people, okay.
No, that's an excellent question. I would like to say we're in a situation where we don't have to worry too much about funding, but the fact is we do have to worry about funding. We, as a state university, we rely on state funds. So we have the state funds that we are relying on their ability to continue to support what we do. And so far, we have not been impacted at the state level. Federally, our funding primarily comes in through grants. And so, and the grants, the federal grants is something that has been daily. Things have been happening with federal grants where they are halted and then started back up again. And then new limitations are being put on some of the grants. So we're watching that, and the university is reacting as we have to as these changes are coming. We do not have any grants currently underway right now that are federal funds relating to our collection and our project with CGM. But it is something we have talked about regularly. We have options to seek funds elsewhere. So, you know, we can go to the private sector. We can go, for example, we have a grant right now with the Digital Library of the Caribbean that is funded by Mellon. And so we can start looking at non-federal sources for funding. We're also fortunate that we have some endowment funds for this collection, which allow us to do actually a lot of the things that we do with CGM and with Pan-Caribbean Sankofa. And when we had like the event that we had that Betsy showed you in the slide, that was something that we were able to apply some of our funding towards that. So we have I guess the short answer, I've given you a long answer, but now I'll give you the short one. We have a little bit of stability in that we have multiple funding sources. But I think there will be impacts. We just have to see what those impacts are going to be from the federal level.
Can I add, John, too? John and I have talked pretty extensively about this for the past few years and feel quite strongly that in order to accurately represent this piece of American history, you have to collect and you have to tell the story and document the history of everyone that was involved and impacted by this endeavor. So if we were not to collect things, parts, the stories of the Caribbean workers that lived there, it would be negligent. If we did not talk about the impact on Panama and the Panamanians that lived and worked there, we would not be serving our profession. We would not be doing our jobs. And so there is that as well, that if we didn't do this, it would be a disservice to the collection, to the state's possession of this history and its stewardship of this history. So maybe I can only speak personally, find solace or strength in that notion that if we were not doing this work, we would be kind of in dereliction of our duty to the community, to the history, to the stewardship of this collection. So.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to have to end it because unfortunately it's 10 minutes to 8 and we're supposed to be out of the building at 8. I want to acknowledge, we have another friend in the house, Ms. Karen Smith. Thank you so much for joining us. And she's also the president of the Friends of the Broward County Library Association. That's for all the libraries, friends. So I want to give her a shout out. Also, I want to encourage you to get business cards, contacts, or whatever in the last 10 minutes that we have. We also have some refreshments. Feel free to take it because it'd be less we'd have to put away. Also, Fran bought the booklet from the memorial program that we had in November, and it has a lot of family history information in it. I don't know how many she has, but she can let you know. And she also has, what do you call those? Yeah, I think there was another name you called. You didn't call it T-shirt. Polos. And then finally, I want to thank my staff, Karen, who just went upstairs, Danielle, Orlando, who's also Panamanian from Cologne, his daddy. And I want to thank everyone for coming. I also want to acknowledge that we have the president of the South Florida Panama Association, Mr. Roy Hines. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And finally, last but not least, I want to present these to Fran. Fran, on behalf of us, I want to thank you. Be careful of that. I'll come to you. You can stay right there. I want to thank you so much for joining us, for coming down. We want to continue our relationship with you, and whatever we can do to support it, please let us know. Here you are. Okay, so in the interest of time, folks, this is it. We're wrapped up. Thank you so much. Oh, can we put that slide back on the artist? Oh, I want to tell you one more thing. This artist, the artist that's on the screen right now, Candy Lopez. Her work is important because this piece is actually yarn, and you know hook rugs? This piece is about 7 feet. It's more than life size, and you see she's wearing a polera, right? So, polera? Okay, excuse me. So, she is now an artist in residence at the Broward County Library, main library, so you can actually see the piece if you're in town. But I wanted to give her a shout out because she's doing some amazing things with her artwork. So thank you so much again.